Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Living in the West, a series of episodes where we look into the lives of those Muslim minorities living in the West. We looked at the beginning the importance of this subject in itself, why we need to discuss it. We looked into the importance of the permissibility of this group of Muslims to be living in the West. Then we moved on to looking at the vision for this group of Muslims, a personal vision and a community-based vision. I have with me today Sheikh Haytham Al-Haddad from the Muslim Research and Development Foundation in the United Kingdom, an organisation and think tank which looks into providing solutions for the Muslims in the West. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, in the previous episodes we spoke about a personal vision and we moved on to a community vision, and this is where we left our conversation. Can we briefly can you introduce this community vision that we're looking into?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen, nabiyana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We said that the community vision, or the vision of the community, has to be broken down into different levels based on the priorities. And we said that the first priority is to protect the ability of individual Muslims to manifest their religion in the public sphere, and in particular in the workplace. Because many Muslims are working with non-Muslim organizations, so they have to have the ability to manifest their religion. For example, and the most important thing, to pray in the workplace. And for sisters sometimes who work in non-Muslim organizations, provided that they are witnessing the other rules and regulations, they have to have the freedom to wear a proper hijab, not just to cover their head, okay, and with the makeup and with maybe tight clothes. No, to have the right to practice a proper hijab. In order to achieve that, the Muslim community should work from a legal perspective to achieve that. Now, here maybe in some countries, for example, America and Britain, recently in 2004, they have this act or the amendment against religious discrimination. Means that any organization is not allowed to discriminate because of a religion, on the basis of religion. Means it is not allowed to refuse someone just simply because he is a Sikh, a Hindu or Muslim. And also, according to the act or the amendment, the organization should provide kind of flexibility for the different followers of different faiths, or the followers of different faiths, to manifest or practice their religion in the
practices.
Yes, workplace. Now, in some other countries, for example, France, Muslims are not allowed to do that, or they don't have enough freedom to do that. And we know the problem of hijab in France and wearing hijab in the public sphere. We know that this problem also exists in some cities in Germany, in some cities in Italy. Now we should put a lot of pressure on the Muslim communities there. They have to work hard towards getting this right as a right. And this may bring us to the other level of vision for the community as a whole. The Muslim community should reach to a level where they have to have an official recognition for Muslims as an integral part of each society. And this is a very important issue, because is Britain, for example, a Christian country? Is it a secular country? What is the position of Britain towards any religion? Similarly, France, okay, France, they claim that they are secular countries, but they are moving from normal secular to an extreme secular, where they are forcing secularism on individuals. And this is against their principles of freedom and secularism. Because if you are secular on a public sphere, you don't force me to be secular. Otherwise, you are not secular, because you are forcing your ideology upon me. In America, for example, there is a level of freedom for Muslims to practice their faith. So this official recognition should be one of the main aims. We know that in the Western world, Islam is not officially recognized as a religion, except in Spain and the Netherlands recently, and in Sweden. Okay.
And do you, I know we're stopping you here, but do you really, it's maybe interesting to the viewers, do you really believe this is due to the lack of a community-led vision?
Yes.
Totally?
Yes, totally. Because, see, if, for example, I came from Britain, okay? Take the example of Britain. Prior to 9/11, the hostility against Islam and Muslims, okay, was not as it is now. So if Muslims before 9/11 working together towards such official recognition, they would have achieved it. But now the situation after 9/11 and after the bombs in Spain and the bombing, the 7/7 in London, the situation is totally different. The level of hostility and the level of the right wings, okay, hostility in particular against Islam and Muslims, makes it so difficult for Muslims to achieve this official recognition. However, we should not give up. And you know, the non-Muslim countries, as we said, they are in a dilemma. What are they going to do with this increasing number of Muslims? What can they do with those Muslims who are demanding more and more, and they are returning to their faith, and they want more manifestation of their faith in the public sphere? What are they going to do? From a historical point of view, Europe is a Christian country. Now, recently, Europe is trying to define itself as a secular country. What is the position of Islam on a public sphere and on an individual sphere within this secular framework? This is a very important question. And that's why it is not easy for Muslims to work towards that. But we have no option but to do it. And it is a long struggle, but inshallah we will be able to achieve it one time.
The community is what leads forward with this plan, and everybody is to jump on board, basically, you're saying.
Of course. And as we said before, each individual has his own priorities. And after achieving those priorities, or alongside with those priorities, he should work towards pushing the cause of the community as a community. Because once the community is able to achieve that goal, the life of the individuals will be much easier. And here, let me give this example. You know, this halal meat, the issue of halal meat. In Britain, we don't have any problem with this issue of halal meat. Almost we don't have any problem. Why? Because the previous generations worked hard towards achieving this. And now we can enjoy it. So if we worked hard towards this official recognition, we will make it easier for the future generations to live in the Western countries. And we might reach to a level that those Western countries are accommodating Muslims and are accepting Islam and Muslims as integral communities. And as part of the society, has his own needs and has his own rules and regulations.
Okay, so this community, in part of a multicultural society, you're speaking about, a society of many faiths, where one of the faiths is not to have a faith. One of the most important parts of any society is education. So what are you asking the Muslim community to do in terms of education, Sheikh? What's the important role for the Muslim community in here?
Now, education is one of the main priorities, or should be one of the main priorities of the Muslim community. What do we mean by that? Education. Education for their children, because we don't want to work on other spheres and forget about our children, because they are the future. And if we don't provide them with education in the childhood, then for sure when they grow up, they will lose their identity, the Islamic identity. So here we have two things. First of all, the ability of Muslims to educate their children, to teach their children Islam, whether at home, whether in mosques, or whether in their own schools. So three things. They should be able or allowed by law to teach their children Islam at home. Now many people might say, but hold on, this is something cannot be stopped. No, it can be stopped. Because as I heard that in some European countries, the schools were questioning the children whether they are being taught that homosexuality is a sin at home or not. And if they found that the child is being taught that at home, they might take the parents who are teaching this to prosecution because of this. So we should reach to a level, okay, that the parents are secure to teach their children the basic elements of Al-Islam, and in order to teach their children the main prevailing sins and for them to be aware of. For example, in some countries they are discussing whether they should force their parents to teach the children that this issue of heterosexual, homosexual is something natural and we should not oppose it. And you know that in many non-Muslim countries, you cannot adopt a child unless you confess that you are going to teach the child that being a heterosexual or a homosexual is a natural thing, and you cannot influence the child against this.
Okay, this question of influence of the state on your religious practices, we're going to look into this after this short break. Please stay with us in Living in the West.
Back to the Prophet. Join Sheikh Amar in the program Back to the Prophet, wherein he teaches us practical lessons from the Prophet's life and how this can help us to overcome our challenges in the present.
We talk about the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, seeking guidance for ourselves. In the early days after the revelation of the Holy Quran, the Muslims were greatly persecuted, so much so that quite a few Muslims had to leave Arabia and migrate to Africa to live among Ahl Kitab, Christian people who followed the gospel of Christ.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Living in the West. Sheikh Haytham, just before the break we spoke about the community's obligation to look into education for this Muslim minority in terms of educating their sons and daughters in the house, in the mosque and in the schools. Do you want to clarify more upon the point of how important it is to push forth for this right?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya al-mursaleen nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We have spoken about the right of parents to teach their children Islam in the house. Now, the right of the Muslim community to teach their children in mosques. This is a very important right. What do we mean by that? Now, mosques play a major role in the life of Muslims in general. We don't want to talk about this because mosques play a central role actually. But in many communities, like for example Britain, like for example the Netherlands, the only place children can receive Islamic education is the mosque. Now, countries differ and communities differ. Sometimes the mosques play a major role in teaching the children the basic principles of Islam, Tawheed, basic fiqh, how to pray, how to observe your fasting and other rituals. In other countries, such as Britain, for example, mosques even teach Quran to the children and make hifz, and there are many hafiz of the Quran in Britain. Now, mosques are under attack because they are teaching the children al-Islam. Now, they are attacked and the attack differs. In some countries, they don't want mosques to teach children al-Islam, claiming that they are radicalizing them. And we all know about this. And in some other countries, they say that the teachers in the mosques, they should be offsetted.
Should be inspected and government regulated.
Yeah,
yes.
Inspected, okay. We have a body to inspect the schools. We should have another body to inspect teachers in the mosques. Now, some people might say, and we have to be careful about this point, some people might say this is good because we don't know the qualification of all teachers. But here we should be very careful, and we would like it to make it clear that be careful, brothers and sisters. The government is not helping you to understand Islam, to understand Islam as it is. The government is trying to portray its version of al-Islam. So later on, if the government interferes in the way you teach al-Islam in these mosques, many of the Islamic rituals will not be taught.
Is there an evidence for this would be the pushing for certain imams in mosques, the regularization of imams, homegrown imams? Wouldn't this be...
This is part of it. This is part of it. But apart from dealing with the imams and the body to regulate the imams, there are bodies in different Western countries to monitor what children receive in these mosques. So we should be careful. The details, we cannot discuss it, but the Muslim community should have that right and should work towards protecting their ability to teach their children in mosques.
Okay, so finally, now we're going on to schools.
Now, in terms of schools, here we have two things. We have the state schools and we have the private schools, private faith schools or private Islamic schools. Now, in terms of the state schools, what do we want to achieve?
Government-run schools, you're talking.
Yes, or government-run schools. What do we want to achieve? The main thing that we would like to achieve it is the freedom for the Muslim children not to be educated anything that is against their Tawheed. For example, in some countries, the children have to attend the church and have to participate in the rituals taking place in churches. In some other countries, or in most of the non-Muslim countries, this is not obligation or this is not part of the curriculum. But we should be careful of this. This is one thing. The other thing is we should have the right to stop our children from attending classes where kufr is manifested. I attended some schools where the children are singing songs related to crucifixion, clear songs about crucifixion, and songs about Jesus as the Son of God. We should have the ability to object and to ask the school not to include our children in such classes because these classes are promoting the principle of any principle or many principles against Tawheed, such as the principle of crucifixion, such as the principle of Trinity. And we have to be careful here, because there are the RE classes. The RE classes, the religious education classes, they are teaching religions, all religions, from an objective point of view. They are not pushing one religion. That can be overlooked. But to brainwash the children with these principles, such as crucifixion, Trinity, etc., this is very, very dangerous. And we, as a Muslim community in any non-Muslim country, we should protect our children from that by law. So that's why we said, and we repeat this, okay, that Muslim community have to reach to a level where Islam is officially recognized in the public sphere, and Islam and the Islamic rituals are officially protected by law. Of course, we cannot expect this to be as if it is in any Muslim country, but we should maintain the basics of these elements or these Islamic principles to be protected.
Okay, so now that's the state school. What about the private school then?
Okay, in terms of the private schooling, you know, there is a discussion now in many non-Muslim countries by many thinkers that do we have to have separate private faith or Islamic schools? And you know that some thinkers are against this, because they said that this promotes
a fragmented society.
Yes, a fragmented society, and there will be no coherence between the elements of the society. And moreover, some of them, they claim that by pushing these schools, we are pushing for more ghettoization.
Yeah, we're isolating our communities.
Yes,
basically, yeah.
And no, not necessarily. Okay, and we have to, of course, we cannot discuss this in details, but we have to have truthful discussion about this point, because, and we said this to many authorities, we told them, if you are catering for our children in the state schools, we won't be marching for independent Islamic schools, because myself, if I want to send my children to an independent private school, I have to pay for that, and this will be very expensive. Why should I do that while I find that the needs for my children are fulfilled in the state school? This is another way to look at it. But if the needs are not fulfilled, then I am forced to send my children to a school where they can find their own needs. And the Islamic schools in terms of ethos, okay, in terms of education, they should be working hard towards achieving high level of academic education as well as ethos, because we don't want these Islamic schools to be just ghettos for those failing students who cannot achieve well in the state schools, so the parents just send them to those schools. Or we don't want them to be shelter for those Muslims who are not behaving well because of the societal influence or because of other influence, and just the Muslims, as a last resort, they send their children to those Muslim schools. We don't want that. We want all what we want, proper Islamic schools that teaches the natural curriculum as well as the basic Islamic education. Bear in mind the ethos of the school are the proper Islamic ethos.
So the community working for the Islamic school would be what, in a nutshell? It would be the aim to push these Islamic schools.
First of all, to have the ability to establish these schools. The freedom to establish these schools. And one step further is to be able to get funds for the schools, provided that the government is not make it a conditional fund. Means that in order to get fund, you have to teach music. You have to push for the ethos of the whole country, provided irrespective of whether these ethos are against your faith, such as you have to push for example, for the issue of homosexuality. Okay? If the Muslims worked hard towards getting these funds without these conditions, then this will be the perfect, ideal situation.
Sheikh Haytham, this is bringing to an end the question of education. But a general viewer may ask, are we asking a lot from our community here in terms of the education? I mean, what other religious communities are already established following this route?
Okay, this is maybe your question that you are forwarding it now, is a question forwarded by many thinkers who are against having faith schools. And we have to say, brothers and sisters, we as Muslims are different from any followers of any faith. Islam is different. Islam is a comprehensive way of life. The way you eat, the way you look like, the way you behave, the way you run your political entity, the way you socialize with others, all governed by Islam. So our needs as Muslims are different from the needs of any other faith community. This is one thing. The other thing is, why do we have a low aim? Why don't we have a higher aim? We as Muslims have a responsibility to establish Islam in the whole world. That is a higher aim. Why do we aim lower than that? Allah Jalla wa Ala commanded us to achieve this. So why to say, let us compare ourselves to other communities? For example, the Sikh community or the Hindu community or other communities, they might not have any problem with regards to mixed marriage. For example, a Sikh is marrying a Hindu is marrying a Christian, etc. But we have limitations. We cannot just allow it. We cannot just open the door. Some other communities, they don't have a problem in the issue of homosexuality. We have a problem with it. We consider it a sin. We don't want to educate our people to tolerate homosexuality as principle. Forget about homosexuals, how to deal with them, but as a principle. So we have our own needs as a Muslim community. That's why we have to work hard towards these needs. And we have to be very, very careful. We should not use the apologetic language. Many thinkers are using the apologetic language. Apologetic language will not help you to achieve anything. You have to be strong in your identity, and you have to be able to demand to protect that identity.
Sheikh Haytham Al-Haddad, Jazakallah khair. I think the Sheikh was very clear on to the question of the Muslims living in the West. A very important topic, a topic which needs all of our efforts, and a topic that inshallah we will cover in the next episode of Living in the West. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.